All right, so this is the first part of our video series for section 9.2, estimating a population of a mean. All right, so these are the main concepts that we're going to cover based on section 9.2. Hopefully you saw these in the interactive assignment. We're going to talk about calculating a point estimate for a population mean. And we are also, in later parts, we're going to construct a confidence interval and interpret it, and then also see how we can use technology to find the required sample size needed to conduct our own study. All right, so if you remember from section 9.1, we talked about a point estimate just being the sample statistic that we get when we are trying to estimate a value for a population. So in the previous section, we said that p hat was the best point estimate for a population population proportion, and now we're going to see that x bar will be our best point estimate for a population mean. And so here's an example. An agricultural researcher is interested in estimating the mean length of the growing season in a region. Treating the last 10 years as a simple random sample, he obtains the following data, which represents the number of days of the growing season. So I've got the data on the next slide. We'll go over and find the sample mean. All right, so here is our data that was gathered. There are 10 values here. We're going to put those into our list. I've already got mine in there, I believe. So when we go to Stat and Edit, you see I've got those values already listed, and you always want to double check, make sure that they're there, that they're right. So make sure your values are okay. They're in there. Then we're going to go to find the sample mean, and to do that we're going to hit Stat again, but this time we're going to go over to the Calculate menu, select one variable statistics. Our data is in L1. We can leave our frequency list blank. And then once we hit Calculate, it'll get our values. And there it is. We've got X bar is 164.2, and these are days. So our best point estimate for the population mean number of days of a growing season is 164.2 days. All right, so just like we had conditions that we needed to check in order to use the one prop z interval, or one prop z int, on the calculator, we have to make sure we can use the t interval by checking a few conditions. The first thing we want to do is make sure that our sample data come from a simple random sample or a randomized experiment. Now, some of your problems will say, just like our previous one, let the last 10 years be considered a simple random sample. That lets us know that we can use that data. And the next thing we want to double check is that our sample size is small relative to the population size. So we've seen this before. When we were doing things in chapter 8, we saw that we needed to make sure that our sample size was less than or equal to 5% of our population size. So that needs to stay true. All right, and then last but not least, our data needs to come from a population that is already normally distributed with no outliers. So that's a big thing. We've got to make sure we don't have any outliers, or our sample size is large. And just like before, we're going to say that our sample size needs to be greater than or equal, I believe we were saying 25 for this book. I thought it was 35, but I believe our book is saying 25. But we just need a big enough sample size so that if it isn't normally distributed, then we know that the sample means will be normally distributed. All right, and then last but not least for this part, where are we going to put this in our calculator? So just like before, we're going to go to our Stat button. We're going to go over to the tests menu. We're still not looking at any tests, so we're going to scroll all the way down to number 8, which is t-interval. And so t-interval gives you 2 options. You'll have an option for data, in which case, just like we had in our list earlier, you'll actually put data into a list and then use that to calculate the confidence interval. Or we may be given statistics. So it might be that you're given a mean, a standard deviation, and a sample size for a particular sample. If that's the information you're given, then you'll want to use the arrow key to change the input from data to stats. You've got to remember to hit enter to actually select statistics instead of data. And then you'll have this window, the second window here, that you can fill in the information.